Okay, the next video is... So when I wake up in the morning and I come downstairs, Chad is always up before me. I sit in my chair after I've grabbed my espresso. Takes me about 15-20 minutes. And then all the things start to come out, all the ideas, usually like video ideas or what we're going to do for the day. And this topic I started thinking about a couple of days ago. Not really sure why, but there was this individual, this is kind of a story time, I guess. There was this individual that I knew. I've known him, gosh, since I was just a young child, like elementary age.
In the congregation.
Yeah, in the congregation.
Where she was from.
Yes. And I, of course, being so young, you don't really get to know that person. But, you see him around the congregation, you know that he's not married. You know he's a single guy. And at that point, I didn't know any history about him. Well...
So you're how old then?
Well, like elementary age, under 10 years old.
So you're just talking about as a
Around
child
10.
in the congregation.
Yep, between, I would say, 12 and under. You're just a child. You're not really even interested in anything that, these people are doing. So then I was related to this story about this person, knowing he was a single guy.
In retrospect. So it's like somebody else in the congregation is now telling her about this guy's situation that you know.
Yep, and now I'm an adult, so I can kind of understand a little bit more perspective in what was going on. So this person told me, I'll just say she told me, that he really wanted to be married, and he could not find somebody in the congregation. And the congregation that I grew up in was a small town. The congregation was fairly large for the community, I would say, about 100 people. And then there was another congregation like maybe 10 minutes away. And then the other congregations that were close by were a half an hour or more away.
So what was this guy's situation? Maybe you should explain that as far as wanting to be married, because it's not just like he's 18 and wanting to be married.
Yep. So he was a single guy. He had been married before. I don't know if he came into the congregation as an adult or what the deal was. I assume that because he has older children, I'll just say, that are not witnesses, and like I said, they're grown and they're adults. So I would say this guy's probably in his late 40s, early 50s probably.
At the time when you were a kid?
Yeah, I would say early 40s, late 30s at the time when I was a kid, and then at the time when I learned this situation, he was probably, like I said, around 50. So she told me that he really wanted to be married, and he would start conversations with people, like at assemblies and conventions. So often is the case, people do, just getting to know somebody. But he would be very forthright and say, I want to get married. I'm looking for a wife. Are you single? Just very honest, open and honest, which to some people can seem very creepy depending on your approach.
And that's kind of funny you mentioned that, depending on your approach, because that was exactly my approach as well. And depending on how somebody says that, I mean, and I was told that by different people. You don't want to seem desperate.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to seem like you're what's the other word you used?
I thought desperate was the word I used.
It was another word. What's the other word you just used, Precious, now? God, I hate these brain farts. Like you're doing something wrong. I had one elder tell me, well, you don't want to do it the wrong way. And I'm like, what do you mean do it the wrong way? Like there's a right and a wrong way to approach someone as far as that goes. Now, granted, some people can seem creepy. One person comes up and tells you, I'm looking for a wife, and it seems romantically genuine, and somebody else does it, and it's like, might creep you out.
Yeah.
It's like somebody came up to Tiffany once and said she was beautiful, and Tiffany's like, what a creep.
I just said it right there. I was not going to hold back. Yeah.
Because it seemed very creepy. And I was like, oh, geez, Tiff, but maybe he didn't mean it that way. But it's the way some people come across and how they carry themselves or whatever can seem very creepy. And that can happen between family members as far as, just the people that close talkers. standing in your bubble. Like I said, that can be between
Yeah.
family. There's totally platonic. There's no intentions whatsoever, yet it's creepy. Or somebody that maintains eye contact too long, and those are just personality things that somebody maybe does that just makes you feel creeped out, but maybe they don't have any bad intentions. Anyway, this elder said, you want to make sure you do it right. And I'm like, so what's the right way? Well, when I go to give a talk at a hall, I can bring you along with me and that'll help you meet people. And it's like, are you kidding me? So now you got to be sponsored by an elder as if, well, I mean, isn't it true?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like you've got to go along with an elder so that way he can sponsor you that this is a good marriage mate or something. It's crazy. So in other words, you can't just go meet people on your own now. Now you need to have an elder to, promote you in a congregation, a neighboring congregation. But that whole idea of what can be creepy and not, and I dealt with that too as well as far as even when we met. I was at a convention. We were at a convention. We met, and the previous night, the first night, there was a girl that was down at the pool, and we were talking. I wouldn't say flirting, but and not really seriously inquiring, but oh, where are you from? What do you plan on doing with your life? Type of a thing. Just kind of chit chat stuff, but more angled towards a relationship if the flavor was that way, if that makes any sense. So it wasn't serious, but it was a conversation of a serious nature towards a future. So it wasn't
A
like we were flirting,
possibility.
or it wasn't like we were, hey, want to date, or anything like that. But it was more angled towards that way. If you kind of catch the flavor of the conversation. Anyway, her aunt had come up to me. Funny that it was her aunt again, but her aunt had come up to me, depending on what you say, aunt, potato, had come up to me and basically bashed me for talking to this 17-year-old girl. And I'm like, hey, I don't know how old she is. And besides, in my mind, I'm sorry, but if she's 17, it's less than a year and she's going to be 18. If you ain't got to figure it out by now what she should or shouldn't be doing, you better figure it out quick. Anyways, how am I supposed to know how old she is? Or that didn't come up in our conversations. If she's doing something she's not supposed to, talk to her, not me. I've got a right to be conversing with people to look for a wife. And anyway, she actually happened to come up to me while I was talking to Tiffany and flat out apologized to me in front of her, to her credit, and said, yeah, you're absolutely right. You totally have a right to look for a spouse, But anyway, so did it seem, so again, it just depends on the person. I mean, when I asked that to you, did it seem creepy?
I didn't feel creeped out.
And
No.
obviously that other girl didn't either. And I didn't have any problems having conversations with girls with the future prospect of getting married that were, serious nature. I didn't really date in the social sense because dating
Mhm.
is a social game. And witnesses want to play that social game of dating as well. But anyway, yeah, you can get creeped out by somebody who says the exact same thing. It's
Just
just
based
the
on
idea,
their
the
it's
way they
based on their
delivery.
approach, yeah, and
Yep.
their delivery, and also if the person, maybe that other girl, and I don't know this other girl that he was talking with, but maybe she wasn't, being 17, she wasn't ready for a relationship like that, a marriage perspective kind of relationship like that, where I was. And so when Chad came up to me, it was like, he's being honest, he's being forthright, he's not going to be playing a game with me. That's great. um,
And
which isn't the case in every
and
scenario.
you're right in that respect. But again, going back to that with that other girl, if you're, and no matter who it is, if you're 17, witnesses are married off by 20. I mean, that's
They're young.
the most of them. I would say 90% are married off by the time they're 20. Wouldn't you agree or no?
I would say like 22 is, especially for a girl, and especially if you're a girl that is raised with parents that are either pioneering elder or somebody in the congregation, you've got like credentials backing you. I would say you're 22 probably for a female.
22.
Yeah.
Before 25 anyway. So
Yeah.
the point is that, and if you're 22 or 20 or whatever else, that's the vast majority. Again, I would say 90% by by 25. That's I bet you it's 98%. I mean, it's just a high, especially more attractive you are, the younger it is. That's just the fact of the matter. Because while there's a certain uh, for guys, oh, you need to be an MS, you need to be an elder, in order to be good marriage material. But for a girl, what can she do? And it doesn't seem like pioneering or auxiliary pioneering is a
No.
prerequisite for the spirituality of a sister.
No, you don't have to have a position. Like I said, it's better if you have parents that are.
Your lineage, yeah.
Hmm.
Fourth generation, and if you can throw out, my dad's an elder, or somebody else is an elder in our family, my grandpa was an elder, or if they were anointed, if you could pull out that, trump card, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, going back to that whole situation, sorry, I just wanted to say that delivery can make a big difference in how a person is perceived as creepy or not creepy, and by whom. No doubt some of the people I approached thought it was creepy, or thought it was desperate, or whatever it was. But to me, that was my way of weeding out the ones who weren't really serious about a relationship. They wanted to play games, date. So again, as a witness, you narrow down, speaking about that number of people and this guy, you narrow down your prospective mates, your prospective mates from the world in general, especially if you're from the world. There's a lot of women out there, girls out there, whatever you want to say, but in witnesses, not necessarily so, because there aren't very many that are left. They're
Single, you're
married
talking about.
off younger, and odds are they're not going to be available after that time period of 25 or so. It's a very limited pool to choose from. I'll just say that, going back to this guy's situation. And I, coming out of the world, was in that same sort of a situation too. I didn't grow up around these teenagers that were, in school and whatever else, and then come of age, and then you've got this
Hmm.
pool to pick from that's in your age bracket, basically.
Hmm. It's a really touchy subject too, because somebody who's 17, 18 years old, 18 is the legal age to get married.
Yep.
17, you just have a little bit of time left until, as a minor, until you're an adult, till you could make decisions for yourself. But you're still considered a minor. And I'm not going to get into the situations of, I'm just not even going to go to those situations. But given that there's such a high rate of pedophilia in the congregation, this is not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about people who are almost to the age
Yep.
of becoming an adult, not somebody who is older guy who is preying on some younger child, a girl, or a boy. um, that's not what we're talking about.
And culturally, marriages in this country, 18 is the legal age. And we all, some people get all bent out of shape about that. But I mean, if you look at a lot of people marriage happens for different reasons. Some people marry for money. Some people marry for looks. Some people marry for family connections. And a lot of that has to do with culturally, as far as age brackets and whatever else. Look at some of the celebrities will marry very young women. They're marrying them for their money and fame, perhaps, and they're marrying back because of their youth and looks. So there can be an exchange there, and no one should judge an adult for making those decisions. Now, where we draw the line at adult becomes a legal issue depending on your country as well. Here in the United States, it's 18.
Mm-hmm.
But our statements that we're making are, so this girl that was 17 at the pool, or Tiffany was 17 at the time as well, by 18, they were probably going to be married anyways. 18, 19, 20, and another couple of years. So what we're trying to say, as far as those parents are concerned, is if your child's not ready to be married at 17, you better figure it out in a hurry. because they're going to be married probably very shortly if they're attractive, especially in the congregation at 18. And
Yeah,
you're not going to have a say whatsoever
you will have no control.
legally.
You
You've
will
got
have
no
no
control.
control.
And we know people who have a very attractive sister that we know.
Hmm.
She was 17. Her parents thought they had their thumbtack on her the day she turned 18.
She put on such a good front. The day she turned 18, she left a note on the table and she was gone.
And she was dating somebody already.
Yeah. So, yeah, you just.
So if you ain't got it, if you haven't got him, if you don't think you've got your 17-year-old aimed the direction where you think they ought to go, by then you're fighting an uphill battle and a losing one.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be ragging on me because I'm talking to your 17-year-old daughter. If she's out of line, if you ain't got a control of it now, or if you ain't got her going in the direction you want now, you ain't gonna change it. And I don't know about that girl and her, what her life turned out like. I have no idea. But
Yeah.
anyway, back to this guy and his situation.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to make a long drawn out thing, but this guy, this is a terrible situation. This guy.
But it was important for us to elaborate on the pool of prospective mates as a witness, if you're not, especially if you're not familiar with it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, given that he couldn't find anybody in the congregation, inevitably he lives in a small community, a small town. You just meet people and you're chatty with people in a small community. You go down to the cafe, or you see somebody in the grocery store. You see them around town, and so you just develop a relationship, like acquaintances.
It's not like a big city where it's ships passing in the night 24/7.
Yeah.
There's a lot more conversation that happens.
Yeah.
That just.
Yeah.
Slower pace of life, whatever.
I'm just going to try to make sure I keep it vague, but still give you enough details. So this guy, would develop these relationships with these women who were not witnesses, and the elders would get wind of this, and they would pull him in the back room and say, you need to be married only the Lord. You need to break it off with this person. This person doesn't probably have any intention. They're not coming to the hall. Are they studying? You need to break it off. This happened multiple times with different women. Nothing happened, like he didn't sleep with them or anything like that, but just developed relationships, loosely relationships with them.
And again, partially because they're slandering him in the congregation. This happened to me too.
Yeah.
Tell that if you're looking for a wife in that way, then you're being desperate, and that it's inappropriate, and you're not doing things the way that they would like you to do them, whatever that is. That's nowhere written in stone anywhere or written anywhere. It's part of their oral tradition. So when you're in that kind of culture, and you've got a limited pool to choose from in the first place, and then they're slandering you on top of that to whoever's left that you might be able to choose as a mate, then it's only natural that you might develop relationships elsewhere. And again, elders, it'd be different if they were actually his buddies, and I don't know this case, I'm just speaking from experience. So often the case, they're not your friends. Because I've counseled somebody like that before, but for instance, her son lived with us for a while. So we had a relationship, a rapport with this person. So when we sat down and said, and she'd been married to somebody who wasn't a witness in her past, somebody who was vehemently opposed, in fact.
And that marriage did not last.
No.
And I don't remember who broke it off, but
and then
she married somebody else who was not a witness, and then had this guy that lived with us.
Had a son, and that child is the one who lived with us for a little while after he was 18. He'd just needed some help getting on his feet. But so with her son, her son and I went and chatted with his mom about marrying this guy that she was going to marry, and he wasn't going to meetings. He had no intention, was not a Bible reader, was not that I was aware, and making sure that, this is a step that she wanted to do. The scripture says, marry only in the Lord. How's it going to go when you want to celebrate? He wants to celebrate Christmas and you don't. That can create strife in a family or in a relationship. So there's a difference between being involved in someone's life and in love, Christian love, wanting to warn them As the scripture says, you have spiritual qualifications. Try to readjust such a man in a spirit of mildness. But not out of, with elders, it has very little to do with that, and more about thinking they have the authority to tell you what to do. And not just tell you what to do, but then enforce that in the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
And for a sister, it's not quite as easy, especially for one like her who is sort of been in the skirts, had worldly husbands for decades, so therefore she was never this icon in the congregation. Um, but there's not a whole lot for a sister. There's not a lot ladder to climb. It's pretty easy to float underneath that radar, which is probably why it wasn't a big deal for her to marry out of the Lord again, marry somebody who wasn't a witness, because she'd been dealing with that for decades, that situation. And it never really affected her in the congregation. But for a guy, there are all sorts of different steps, from handling mics to running sound to being behind the literature counter, or being behind there's two literature counters, one for the Watchtower and then there's one for the other literature counter. Um, just being involved in all these aspects, giving talks. So there's all these different things they'll take away from you and then tell the congregation that you're not spiritually strong. So all of those steps, none of them scriptural, by the way. There's no mic handlers. There's no, behind the counter person. There's none of these. All these little steps are what they'll use against you in the congregation to force you down the path of whatever they want you to do. Now, again, that doesn't have to be what's scripturally required of you. It can be what shoes you're wearing, how you cut your hair, how you trim your facial hair, you name how you wear your suit, and they'll use all of these different little glory positions to keep you going in the path that they want you to go down, and they shame you in the congregation. Did we talk about brazen conduct here?
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes that when you decide to go against what they say, that's brazen conduct. That's not going along with what they say to do. And then they can start the pressure in the congregation. As far as a marking talk, certainly local needs, just slandering you in the congregation. Again, without saying the situation, just saying, well, they're doing very well, a very good association right now. It could be anything like that. Making comments about how we wouldn't want to be dating worldly people, or whatever it can be, to socially pressure you, to make you feel like you are not spiritual. Just because you're, again, not just only biblical things, but not doing what they say as the authority. Mm-hmm. So just to paint the culture that this ends up that you end up thrown into. Go ahead. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fine. I don't think that's not important. I think, what was the next thing I was going to say about him?
The elders were, where you left off was where the elders were calling him into repeated
Yes.
meetings about these relationships
Yes.
that he would end up developing.
Yes, so he would develop these relationships and then have to break them off because of, through guilt, the elders would guilt him into having to break these relationships off. This happened more than one time. Eventually, with so much pressure from the elders doing this, he couldn't handle it anymore and he committed suicide over this. And given that he's got grown children, adult children not in the congregation, they were furious, and rightly so. They were not witnesses, of course. They didn't agree with what Dad was doing. They wanted Dad to be happy. So I don't know why that came into my head the other day, just the marry only in the Lord versus the date only in the Lord situation. I mean, we had to deal with that. And the fact that a person gets so much pressure and they get their so much meddling in their life, it's them that has to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, it becomes loving counsel over authoritative dominion. So is it loving counsel? I'm a buddy of yours and I'm trying to give you the best advice possible with using the scriptures, or is it this is what you've got to do, and it ends up being I'm playing master over your faith?
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, it ends up being the latter, because they hold all of these little things against you, because it's not just okay, well, we can't have you being an elder and doing this and that, obviously. And maybe that's understandable. We can't have you marrying, going against the scripture, marrying out of the Lord, and, being an elder in the congregation, being held up. But now they use every little thing as an example. Then pressure shame you by saying you're not spiritual if you're not a ministerial servant. So if you're not a ministerial servant and you're not spiritual, then what are you if you can't handle mics? And what are you if you can't handle sound? And what are you if you can't hand somebody a magazine from the back counter? And what are you? Do you see how? And for us, for example, when we were going through what we were going through, here I've got studies up there that are on the school doing a Bible reading, and I can't be up there doing a Bible reading.
They make a mastery out of beating someone down to the ground and taking they try to take every single piece of dignity away from you if they could do that. And when they say you need to, write a reinstatement letter, and I know that we've heard multiple stories, and I'm sure you have too, where it's been, they want you to practically be begging and groveling and weeping on the ground, kissing their feet to come back.
That's right. And they'll send 5-6 letters in order to get reinstated. It's crazy.
Yep. And that is like they're masters at trying to do that to people, to just tear them down to their absolutely nothing. They will humiliate you, and that is their goal.
Yep.
Is
you
to
absolutely suck my authority, or you're not coming back.
And so I have one more little story about that, and I'm not going to give much detail, because I think that I'm talking about humiliation in this point. So the last guy, like I said, committed suicide over this.
And not just over that, but the thing is that people, you don't know what people are going through also. And I'm sure it's not just over that. I don't think you can ever blame it on just one thing.
No,
but to say that it doesn't have a major factor, it definitely does.
Yeah, but I mean, you know what it's like to feel absolutely miserable, and you want to be married, and then just the loneliness of wanting to be with somebody can consume you so horribly. And then when you have somebody telling you you're not a spiritual person, how are you going to find somebody in the congregation when you're like this? You can't be dating somebody out in the world. And then they just go on and on and on, and the pressure gets so bad that they just can't handle it anymore. So the other scenario, and it just popped in my head again, but it was something that I had told Chad about like maybe a month, 6 weeks ago. There was a sister who was dealing with this similar situation, and she was also an older sister, and she had she didn't have parents living anymore. She was on her own, but she needed some assistance with living. So she wasn't she was able to take care of herself, but she needed help. She wanted to be married, but she had met somebody through another sister at the same congregation that I was from. This other sister had a son who had gotten into trouble, like an adult son. I don't know what kind of trouble he was in, but he was in prison. And the other guy, how can I say this? The one sister had a son who was in prison. The other sister who wanted to be married was introduced to a different guy in prison, and then they ended up getting married.
But they were at the same prison?
So they were at the same prison in Washington State, and then of course
they were both witnesses.
And they
in prison.
I think
Or the one guy was a witness, the son was or was not?
The son was not a witness.
Okay.
The other guy was baptized in prison.
Okay.
Okay, am I getting this right? So then the sister marries the witness guy, the brother.
Active.
He's an active brother, but he's in prison. So the elders are giving her grief about this, and while they're giving her grief about this, even before they got married, like while they were dating, she would go over and visit this guy, and they carried on this courtship or whatever. Well, to make a long story short,
So they're giving her grief about seeing a guy who's a baptized witness.
yes,
just because he
but
happens to be in jail.
Yes, and because they like to control over this woman's life because she needs assistance, and So the same kind of scenario, they were giving her private counsel in the back room about Mary only in the Lord, and
But he was in the Lord.
And she would say, I guess she was. I guess he was. I don't know.
Well, you can't say he was a baptized witness and saying not
From
Mary
what
only
I
in the Lord.
remember, he was a baptized witness, but giving her counsel on that she shouldn't be seeing this person because he was in prison.
I wonder what scriptures they would use for that.
I don't know the full scenario, but I just remember the point I'm trying to make is when they're giving local needs parts, she wasn't doing anything wrong from what I could see scripturally. She wasn't doing anything wrong. I mean, she hadn't had sex before she was married. She hadn't done anything.
He's a baptized witness, so it's like, what would the counsel be there? Now it just looks like that's so often the case with elders. Whatever they think that you should be doing.
And it's like bullying kind of thing. So now the elders decide they're going to do a local needs part. And this is kind of the point that I'm trying to bring out is when they said from stage about dating somebody who was in prison or something to that effect. I mean, it was like so obvious. Like, you're talking about her. Like, who else in the congregation is doing
this? This is confidential.
Why aren't they just saying her name on the stage, Right. And I remember her.
So we're going to use your exact situation and be confidential and explain exactly what's going on.
I remember her standing up, and she was sitting like maybe 3/4 of the back. We always sat up front. And I remember her standing up, and just an uncontrollable sob, like ugly cry. And it's like, you could not have ripped this woman's heart out in a physical way and just smashed it right on the stage. Look at her. Like, how can you be so horribly Pharisaic and do that to her?
I mean, and I want to interject something here.
And so she just cried like that, ugly cried, all the way out of the hall, and everybody knows what's going on. I mean, it's a small community. It's a congregation. You know how they are. They all talk. Everybody knows what's going on. You don't have to give a local needs part.
And let's face it. This is what I wanted to interject. It's a local needs. Local needs are local needs of the congregation. Now, something like this, you might do a local needs about, teenagers drinking.
A more generalized subject.
Something to where it could affect if someone has been in trouble for getting drunk, or someone is specific in trouble for sleeping around, or you can do a local needs because it can affect others in the congregation. I mean, is this a situation here that there's such an effect in the congregation that a person may think it's okay to where a lot of the congregation is going to go out and do that item, whatever it is, sleep around, think it's okay to get drunk? How many of these people are going to go and get a spouse from the prison? I mean, is that really a problem?
That's right.
The prison is, by the way, the prison was across the state line and
across the state
and across the street. Yeah, so I mean, it's not like there's a prison right there in town, and that a possibility that many people could be seeing people in the prison in town. That wasn't the situation. The prison was a ways away, hundreds of miles, in fact. So it's just absurd to think that we need to give a local needs about a woman dating or about dating someone in prison. That's just flat shaming. It has nothing to do with loving counsel or counsel to the congregation even.
No. I just felt so horrible for her because nobody should feel, I mean, if you want to counsel me on something, do it in a private setting. Let me ugly cry in secret, not in front of the whole hall where there's over 100 people.
Well, no doubt they did do that first, but that shows how they ratchet up the rhetoric.
Yeah.
So if you don't accept their counsel in private, Well, now we're going to take it and shame you in the
We'll make an
congregation,
example of
even
you.
though it's not anything scriptural you're doing.
Yeah.
And it becomes the brazen conduct part is that you are not accepting our authority. Again, in the dictionary, brazen conduct is conduct that carries on with what you're doing, either confident or just without shame. Why should I be ashamed of dating someone in prison? He's repentant over what he's done. He's paying his debt to society. Perhaps he's even paid the restitution. Whatever it is, there's nothing scriptural about not dating someone in prison. That's a personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not a wise one, but that's certainly not someone else's job to play master over your faith and your life. What happened to Deuteronomy, where you'll receive the blessing or the malediction as an individual, and how you live your life as to Jehovah?
Yeah. And I think for her, it was important to have that relationship. I mean, I think she was nearing like 55, 60 maybe. I just felt like she just really, I don't mean to make this sound so horrible, because it sounds horrible when I say it, but it was like for her to say, I have a husband, was super important to her. Because like he's in prison, and I don't think that he ever got out of prison before she's passed away now, before she's passed away. So it wasn't like she had any responsibility in the fact of, oh, I've got to take care of a husband this in the way like you would if you're not in prison.
And we can say that from an outsider's viewpoint as a person, but again, we know witnesses who were married and they lived in different houses.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know at least two right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
That lived in different houses, different cities,
different
and yet
states.
They were steered, yeah, different states, and yet they're still married. And hey, you know what? That's up to them.
Yeah.
The scripture says not to separate. I wonder if the elders harped on them nonstop for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just bring out that scenario basically because of the humiliation that the elders want to try to do. Not try. They do humiliate people, and they will do it, and they're masters at it. And
that leads to some people, it pushes them too far.
Yep. And I refuse to let myself, what am I trying to say?
Be shamed by men is what I would say. I don't know if
I would never get down on my knees in any way and say, oh, please, I'm so sorry, to them, as if they're some sort of authority.
And that's with our situation. If we had done something wrong, there would be something to be ashamed over. But I'm sorry, asking questions? No, you even told me in your literature that was okay to do. So you disfellowshipping us for that is absurd. It's absurd.
But I have something, yeah, I agree with you. But if somebody really did do something wrong, I'm saying against God, they would pour out their heart to God in repentance.
Sure.
Cry over it, as if that scripture says, please don't throw me away, right, like David said. And why does a person have to have that same attitude like they would with their prayers, as if they're saying the same thing or having that same humble approach to elders who could not give a crap about them as people?
Yeah. And by the way,
it's all about them.
That's not Tiffany's words.
And their authority.
That's somebody that was in the truth, or a witness for 50 years, wife of an elder.
Who said what?
That said that.
Oh, they don't care about you. Yeah,
they don't care about you.
Yeah.
They will bait you. No, I see what you're saying, and that I would say that the answer to that is that you shouldn't be begging the elders at that point. You're not. You have contrition towards God, though. So you're repentant towards God, and they see that repentance, and you're just relating to them what you've done. There's a responsibility to keep the congregation clean.
But they're not appointed by any special Holy Spirit or anything like that. They're not. They just see what they just do what they want to do.
Yeah.
They do what they want to do. And if they want to humiliate you more than the next guy because of what, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, is this like Hollywood where if the woman wants to be reinstated, all she's got to do is sleep with the judicial committee and then she can get right back in?
Pretty much.
I mean, come on. It's
Pretty
disgusting.
Much. It's funny you bring it out that way. As long as you suck their authority, that's exactly what happens. So in a spiritual sense, that's absolutely what it is.
Sick.
It's absolutely what it is. But to illustrate that point, we know a sister who would she'd date a guy.
Oh shoot.
Commit fornication.
This is so great. We're
Get-
like really
get
roll to roll,
disfellowshipped,
like 45 minutes in.
Right? Get disfellowshipped. The guy, she'd witness to the guy would become a Jehovah's Witness, she'd get reinstated. She'd cheat on that guy with somebody else, get disfellowshipped. That guy would study, become a witness. She's married to him now. She'd get reinstated again. Then she'd cheat on that guy. I'm not kidding. This hadn't happened, 3 or 4 times?
Yeah.
We were studying with guy number
3, and she was already moved on to number 4, I think.
Yeah. No.
This is not what I mean, though, with elders, but the story is funny.
But no, it is what you mean with elders, because how is she able to repeatedly get back into the
you think she was
congregation?
sleeping with the elders?
Spiritually speaking is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Sucking up to their authority. All she's got to do is suck up to their authority. Right? And she's back in the congregation. You're not talking literal sex. What we're talking about is spiritual humiliation. What we're talking about is being a spiritual sycophant. Just going with whatever the authority says. If you suck up to their authority, they'll let you in again. So, yeah, in a spiritual sense, it's just like Hollywood. As long as you give yourself up to them, they'll let you in. How is that any different?
It's gross.
So, granted, we're not talking about sexual immorality and the elders sleeping with them sexually, but most oftentimes, those men that do that in those positions in Hollywood are doing it out of the authority of their position. And it's no different when you spiritually talk eliminate the act and just talk about the intent. People, it's so funny, because they'll talk about money, for example. Money motivates people, sex motivates people. In the end, all across the board, most people recognize it's a form of power. That sex can be a form of power, that money can be a form of power, the spiritual position can be a form of power. And so as long as you suck up to that authority and you submit to that authority, whatever it is, it has nothing to do with submitting to God's authority, because that's different. God's authority may or may not be man's authority. Anyway, anything else?
No, I just wanted to go off on that little tangent, I guess. But so that was our little story time video. So now you can watch the next few clips of our restoration. I'm trying to stand in a place where it's not so windy. Today's fierce. I can't even believe it. We were going to go up there and paint the turret section, like those dormers, but it's just so windy. I don't feel like getting blown off the roof. So we're just doing detail work right now on the ground. Well, ladders, I guess. I'm finishing up the yellow trim around the windows, and I'll finish like the windows in the front. And Chad is doing navy blue. I'm so glad we did this. I'm gonna see if you can see this. Can you see how pretty that's gonna look? Can't wait till it's done. So that will be blue. Where the numbers were right here, that will be navy. Well, I don't think it's considered navy. I can't remember what it's called, like Arctic deep blue something. The tops of these will be blue. And up here, I don't know if I've even said this, the bottom pieces here will be blue. And if we can find anything else to kind of just accent it with very limited time, because we're running out of time. We're supposed to get a freeze next week. This is September 2nd or 3rd, I'm not sure. But it said on the 8th we're supposed to get a freeze. So we'll see how that goes. But that's still cold. So we'll see how it goes.
A little closer today. I got the sunburst done up there. And the letters, and we decided to go dark blue on the top. Tiffany did, and it looked good. So all the vestibule is done now. Now it's just the side windows and the turrets coming together slowly but surely. Beautiful day this morning. And it looks like they finished our little boil problem. We had frost boils out here this last year, and we get new asphalt. Cool. Bricks for this house. So we are just about done with painting. We'll be finished with the majority of the tough stuff today. Tiffany's working between the turrets up there right now. We got this back one, the yellow, done on this back one over here, where you can barely see the top of the spire on the other side. And the yellow one's done on that one, and we're working on the yellow on this one, and then we'll go back and finish the blue. But hopefully we'll be done with the majority of it today, and then it's just going to be about detailed touch-ups after we're done with everything. But I'll do another video when we finish it. So there it is, a majority of the painting complete. We got the top turrets all done now. We were going to do those undersides right there in a dark blue underneath the turret in front of the window, but we decided not to, because if somebody wants to change that accent color later on that's right there, well, then all they got to do is just change that color quick without having to try and figure out to get up there and do all that work. But we're all done. Now it's just a matter of some touch-up later on or something, but now we can get the roof finished. Thank God. And look who popped up on top of the world. What you doing up there?
I gotta get my rope up.
Oh yeah.
Top back on.
Yeah. So we're onto the roof this morning. It's blowing about 30 miles per hour today. Or at least it's supposed to at the peak. It's probably blowing about 20 right now, so we'll see how this goes. But at least we're off and running. And while the rest of the world is in a heat wave, we get this wind coming in, and we're supposed to have 32 this week. Probably by Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, I think we're going to be down to freezing at night. Great.
It's windy and cold. Supposed to freeze tonight. Chad is up there getting the last of the couple of valleys. It's very scary. Somebody's walking up, just a second. There's planes going by, sorry. There's one right there. I'm gonna try to stand behind this truck because of the wind, but I don't know if he meant to drop that or not. Did you mean to drop that? Yeah, he did. But he's just trying to get up to the valleys because he's gonna do the top from the top. But he's having to split the two dormers to get in there because we don't want to have to run another ladder jack. We can't. We don't have a small enough board, like 2x6 board. That is so scary being up there. I was up there with him a second ago and he's like, go get my camera and video. So I came down, but it's only about 50 degrees today. It's supposed to get a freeze tonight, which is good for doing the south side because then we're not too hot. And tomorrow it's supposed to be the same way to do the west side, and it's the hottest sides of the roof. So it's actually good, it's cooler. But I'm cold because it's such detail work, you're not really moving around a lot. I had to make coffee and bread, bring some like pumpkin bread back. I should post that recipe, make it and post that recipe. It's so good. Pumpkin butterscotch bread, it's delicious.
It's time for a break.
He wants a break. Okay, time for a break.
So we haven't videoed in about 3 days, and it's windy again, so I don't know if this video will turn out either, but we did the rest of the roof. It's all finished now, except for the ridge. Tiffany had to pack all of that up there. Some of it she packed up by those ladders there, but we took that ladder down and went from on the back side, we went from the ground all the way up to the eave, which is about 30 feet. And she packed them up there 4 shingles at a time, the entire back half of the roof. But now it's on to the front of the vestibule here.